Truth and story. Once in a wee village in County Kerry, in the very southwest of Ireland, a young man wandered from village to village. He hoped to find someone who'd just listen to him. He was earnest and he was direct. He always spoke plainly, and his eyes held a sharpness that many found quite unsettling, really. Wherever he went, people swiftly turned away from him. They found him too harsh, too blunt, and too cold. They didn't actually like the way that his words cut through their comfort. It laid bare some of the things that they really preferred to ignore. The young man, he walked alone oftentimes, with his heart heavy with loneliness. He couldn't understand why others avoided him. After all, he only spoke the truth. Yet no one seemed willing to listen. It was dreadful. One day, then, as he wandered through a thick forest just outside of Killarney, he came on a wee cosy cottage. Outside this cottage sat an elderly woman. She was busy stitching a cloak of many fine colours. She looked up and she smiled warmly at him. Whenever she put her eyes on him, it was the first smile that the young fellow had seen in what felt like ages. "Come sit with me," the wee old woman said, gesturing to a bench beside her. He hesitated, of course, but he accepted the offer, for what else could he do? And he was grateful for the kindness in her gaze. After a while, the young man then shared some of his troubles with this elderly woman. He spoke of how people always turned away from him, how they refused to listen to him, how they even shunned him as if he was something to be feared, to be dreaded even. As she listened quietly, her hands never really stopping their work on the cloak. When the young man had finished, she said, "It's not your words they fear, but how you present them. You must learn to soften the edges, to offer your message in a way that they can receive." But how?" he asked. She smiled. She held up the nearly finished cloak. "Here, let me show you, son." She then draped the cloak over the young man's shoulders, and suddenly he felt different, softer, warmer, more approachable even. Now, she continued, "You go back to the villages, speak to the people there again, but this time you wear my cloak. Tell your stories with warmth, with colour, and with care." The young man did just as she advised. As he returned to the village, then, people no longer turned away. Instead, they actually gathered around him. They were drawn to this vibrant cloak, which now adorned him. He received a real Céad Míle Fáilte, which in English means 100,000 welcomes. They listened to him, captivated by the stories that he wove. And as they listened, they began to understand the deeper meanings that actually were within his words and his tales. They no longer feared what he had to say. In fact, they actually welcomed it. They appreciated it, they even sought it out. The young man marveled at the change, and he returned to the old woman to thank her later. "You've given me such a great gift," he said. "I understand now what you meant. But who are you really, and why did you help me?" She smiled, her eyes now twinkling with a well-earned wisdom. "I'm Story, and you young fella are Truth. Alone, you're too much for many people to face. But whenever you're wrapped in the cloak of Story, you're really someone that people can embrace." From that day on, then, Truth and Story travelled together, inseparable companions, and wherever they went, people gathered together to listen. They weren't always aware, though, that the stories that they loved were filled with the very truth that they once feared.